Okay, welcome. Hello, everybody, to the Jaybefaunt channel. I am your host, James Fauntleroy. So good to see all of you here on this beautiful Tuesday afternoon. The Jaybefaunt channel is available on all major podcast platforms. So go ahead and subscribe to me there. Also part of the Revolutionary Blackout Network, so you can see me on Sundays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays. Just like to give a shout out to all of you who are watching this evening. As you guys know, that whenever I do have a guest on, I always go to my chat a little bit later in the stream just for the sake of time, because I want to be respectful to my guest. However, I would also like to share that we have a guest today. I am very excited. A couple of guests that are actually coming from the Ohio Coalition to End Qualified Immunity. We have Kyle Pierce here now, and Miss Cynthia Brown will be on her way in a little while in order to join in. But I would like to introduce Mr. Kyle Pierce to the channel. Thank you so much, Kyle, for coming.
And thanks for having me, James.
Yeah, so you're part of the Ohio Coalition to End Qualified Immunity. And as far as my channel is concerned, quite a few people are adept to knowing what qualified immunity is, but there's some people who may be new to the channel who may not know exactly what it is. If you can give a purview exactly to what qualified immunity is for the audience so that they can know what it is, so they can follow a little bit more easier.
Absolutely. So qualified immunity, it only applies to civil cases when, say, an officer or any government employee violates your rights. Then when you try to sue them through the courts, the civil courts, you have to overcome this thing called qualified immunity, which automatically applies, and you have to prove that it should not apply in that case. And this is something that came about from the what is called the Ku Klux Klan Act back in the late 1800s that allowed people to sue individual government employees or people that are acting under the color of law who violate a person's rights. Well, fast forward to the mid-1900s, and the Supreme Court rules, oh, wait, actually, if they were acting in good faith, if they were just enforcing an unconstitutional law, they get this qualified immunity. And then later in the 1980s, they decided, well, qualified immunity applies if the law is not clearly established. And so what this clearly established hurdle means is that there has to be a prior case that is almost exactly like the case that you're trying to bring, in which someone has won that case against the government. And the best example I can use of that is actually here in our Circuit Court of Appeals, encompasses Michigan, Ohio, Kentucky, and Tennessee. In Tennessee, there was a gentleman who was detained by officers. He was sitting down, had his hands up, surrendered, and the officers sicked a police canine on him. And they got qualified immunity when he went to sue because the similar case, the person was lying down and not sitting up when they had the police canine sicked on them. So it is any minor inconsistency kicks this case out the window and allows qualified immunity to be applied. And so people don't get restitution for damages done to them by government. They don't get any form of justice because qualified immunity typically is almost impossible to overcome.
Yeah, so you guys also have the formal definition here. It says qualified immunity is a legal loophole that makes almost impossible to sue government officials and politicians when your constitutional rights were violated, as you so adequately said. So this means that even if the government violates someone's constitutional rights, it may not be held liable if the law on that specific issue was not clearly established in the time of the violation. And this is just really this is the allowance, the permission to allow police officers, or as we say, state actors, to act basically carte blanche to do whatever they want, in the name of the state. This sounds extremely. I'm trying to purse my words carefully here, but it sounds draconian. to be honest with you. It sounds anti-democratic, because you cannot actually use your voice to say this person in this government position violated my rights, and so therefore they can't be held accountable for that. That just doesn't sound right.
Exactly. It's like you said, it's it goes against everything that this country is supposed to be founded on. The very basic tenet is a government accountable to the people. And if you don't have that, then you don't have anything stopping these government actors from violating people's rights or using unreasonable force or just getting away with heinous things.
Mm-hmm. And the crazy part about it is that everybody knows a story about police brutality, right? Mm-hmm. We all have seen it happen. Lest we forget 2020 and all the moments of police brutality that were recorded on our cell phones, right? In 4K for people to see, especially because they were protesting an act of police brutality against the rights of a man, where he was laying down on the pavement, and he had an officer kneeling on his neck for over 8 minutes. And so the crazy part to me about this is that it is still 3 years afterwards, and we're still trying to fight this battle of ending qualified immunity. Now, my question to you is, why do you think that this is such a hurdle to go over? Like, what are the obstacles in place that are keeping this draconian law in place, so that we really can't get we can't get justice for what was violated against us?
So and I would like to clarify, this is not a law. This is just a Supreme Court decision on the law that allows you to sue government officials when they violate your rights. And it's called this Section 1983 of the Federal Code is what allows you to bring those suits against government agents or people acting under the color of law. Congress has always had the authority to clarify their intention and say actually qualified immunity does not apply. They've always had the authority to abolish qualified immunity. And that was one of the biggest things that held up the passage of the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, was that it would have gotten rid of qualified immunity. And even a single issue bill in the federal Congress, I believe it was simply titled the Ending Qualified Immunity Act, and was, I think, a sentence or two. It would have just ended qualified immunity. It had Republican, Democrat, and Libertarian co-sponsors. So you had the entire political spectrum introducing this bill, and it still couldn't get passed. And one of the biggest hurdles, as you were talking about, is these police unions. You also have public employee unions, because what qualified immunity does, it protects the individual government employee from personal liability. So they themselves in these suits would be held liable. However, a study done by Joanna C. Schwartz out of UCLA, I believe she is one of the nation's foremost experts on qualified immunity, conducted a study that showed that over 99.5% of cases in which someone can get past that qualified immunity hurdle, the government employee is indemnified by their employer. So it's the city, the state, whatever department is the ones paying out these settlements, not the individual employee. So the whole tenet of qualified immunity, protecting these individual government employees from being personally liable in these cases, is a moot point. And the Supreme Court needs to revisit it. Congress needs to act. But until they do, we're going to keep on doing what we're doing.
So this is going to be a bit of a gruesome analogy, but I want people to really get the scope of what qualified immunity is. As many people in my audience know, that I was in the food industry for a few years before I got sick. I was a line cook. I took culinary school and everything. keeping qualified immunity is like me being a cook in the kitchen. And let's say you got a steak or a burger, right? But I cooked it well done when you wanted medium. And they bring the burger back to be what we call refired. So just put it back, or cook it, make a new one so that it's medium instead of well done, right? But I'm frustrated. I got into a fight with my spouse. The dog peed, on my shoe, whatever. And so out of my frustration, right, to the customer, I decide to spit on the burger that I refired out of retaliation and then returned it just because. And then that customer finds out that I spat on that burger. Now that customer can actually sue me liability for it. But because of qualified immunity, they can't sue me. They can only sue the restaurant, but they can't sue me, which means that if I can't be sued, I can jump from restaurant to restaurant to restaurant, spitting in people's burgers with abandon, abusing people, and they have no way to actually hit me personally, which means that I am absolved from responsibility for doing a crime against a person. Am I correct in that analogy when it comes to qualified immunity?
Yes. And you could even go further and say you could stay at that same restaurant if that restaurant doesn't fire you, because that's often what happens. It's, 2 weeks paid vacation and right back in the thick of it. The officer who killed Donovan Lewis had hundreds of prior complaints. And you look at all these instances where it does get to the point of, killing of an unarmed person unjustifiably. You see so many prior incidents in which this could have been headed off if there was some sort of accountability. And I want to stress that this isn't just in those extreme cases where someone is murdered by a government agent. It is also the cases where, like Anthony Novak up in Parma, Ohio, he made a parody Facebook page of the Parma Police Department, just having fun. And as is his free speech right, he was arrested. He was jailed for 3 days before he could make bail, missed a day of work out of that. He was put all the way through a felony jury trial in Parma, Ohio. He was found not guilty on First Amendment grounds by the jury. When he went to sue the police department and those involved, they were granted qualified immunity by the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, federal court. And then when he attempted to appeal it to the U.S. Supreme Court, they declined to hear his case just this past March. So he will never get restitution. Those individuals involved will never be held to account for the injustice they committed. And that is just in the grand scheme of things, that's a minor infraction against an individual for arresting them because they made a parody Facebook page and, no one was really physically hurt, but there were economic damages. He had to sit through a felony jury trial. He had to miss that time out of his life to play the dog and pony show of a police department that got its feelings hurt.
Yeah, basically, look, it's basically, oh my God, they made us look bad out of a parody. And because of that, you decide to abuse your power and arrest the guy, put a felony on his record. What? This is crazy. I'm just like, what in the world? Like, how is this allowed?
It's, I would like to ask the Supreme Court that. It's great, though, that we can end this on a state level, as it's been ended in New Mexico through the state legislature. It was ended in Colorado through the state legislature. It was ended in Nevada through the state Supreme Court. It was ended in New York City by city council. It was ended in Connecticut in very limited violations. I believe it is just violations of warrantless searches and seizure, and I believe unlawful arrest if I'm not mistaken. But there is a movement in the country, and it's been picking up over the past couple of years, especially with so much attention being drawn to the root causes of the injustices in our criminal justice system since the George Floyd protests.
Yeah, and the thing is that I think ultimately, it's really a dereliction of duty by the powers that be. And I'm one of those people who, you know, despite what some people may know about me, is that I'm a lot more radical in my beliefs regarding police than maybe some other shows you've been on. But I say that, we need to go further than just ending qualified immunity, but at least ending qualified immunity is a start, because ultimately, if we are going to sit here and allow, have police, then I think honestly we should have a system where they're held accountable just like anybody else who has any type of position where they can literally affect the lives of people directly.
Mm-hmm.
Because ultimately, you literally have the lives of people in your hands when you are in a governmental position when it comes to ending qualified immunity. You have, you should not be someone who is you should not be someone who the state or the courts will look away from whenever you do something horrible. Because the thing is that we have noticed. I mean, look back to when I was a little kid. Yes, I'm that old. When I was a little kid, when they beat Rodney King, they beat him nearly to death. And the police officers didn't get any jail time.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you or I were to do something like that, of course.
Right? Yeah, we'd go right to jail.
Yeah. And let's be honest, I would serve more jail time than you because, but at the same time, either one of us, just for doing something like that, just for doing something heinous like that. And don't get me started on the amount of rape kits that have been tested that are sitting in police departments all over this country, 250,000 of them. Mm-hmm. How many of them have the DNA of police officers? I would like to know.
Exactly. And, that's one of the reasons, or I guess the biggest reason why the Columbus Police Department Vice Division was disbanded was because they were raping sex workers. And it's, this Governor DeWine, he got elected in part saying that, we're going to test the rape kits, blah, blah, blah. Well, that hasn't been done. They're still sitting there untested. There's who knows who's out running the streets and, committing, these violations against people with no, the rape is so underreported in this country that, one kit could stop 3 or 4 or 5 others from happening.
Yeah. That's what makes me mad, is that there's so many people who would say, no, because we can't take away the rights of, the police officers because people will just sue, police departments with abandon. And that's not true, because the thing is that if you have proof, then guess what? It's going to happen. That's not a unreasonable position. And so, yeah, I mean, what do you say to people who say that they would just sue police departments and abuse that system if qualified immunity is ended? Like, what would your response to that be?
I'd say that's the biggest concern that people have when it comes to ending qualified immunity. And there are, two things that we address on that. It's one, that you're going to have to find an attorney who is, unless you're paying this attorney up front, who believes in the case enough that they think the case will win to justify investing dozens, if not hundreds of hours into a civil case. Then on the other hand, the amendment that we're proposing ends qualified immunity in much the same way that it was ended in New Mexico. And that is where the government employer, say it's the department, the city, the county, the state, whatever, they are the ones to be held financially liable in any civil cases arising out of this amendment. And so that kind of balances the concerns of, well, you're going to have officers thinking that they're going to go into bankruptcy if they make one small mistake, and which in some of these mistakes that, may be deserving. And, just, I wish I had the data in front of me, but Joanna C. Schwartz, I definitely recommend to anyone listening, check her out. She has vast amounts of data on this.
Let me tell you. You may not be saying it, but I'm going to say it. Look, if police officers if we end qualified immunity and police officers get bankrupt for the actions that they take against the people, good. I'm sipping tea on that one, because the thing is that if it makes them more careful, why is that a bad thing? That's my question. Why is, like, for instance, if they want, they can have liability insurance. They can have that, right? Yeah. Look, it's the same thing with same thing with doctors. Doctors have liability insurance just in case, right? What if you're a bus driver? What if you're a pilot? You need that liability insurance just in case you do something wrong.
And that's something we've actually spoken with legislators here in the Ohio legislature is, maybe introducing a bill that would mandate professional liability insurance, because, especially where you have a Republican supermajority in our state legislature that we have in Ohio, you're going to get further with those kinds of free market solutions than you are basing something off of, well, we need to improve our justice system, because it's often not reason enough for them to take action.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate, but.
Yeah. I want to get your opinion on this. I actually talked about this on RBN a couple months back. What was that, a month and a half ago? Probably about 6 weeks ago. But this is an article about Robert F. Kennedy Jr., since we're talking about people in power. Of course, a lot of people know that he's running to be the commander-in-chief of the United States. He's running to be the president, right? He actually had an interview with Black Press USA about his candidacy. And one of the things that I wanted to highlight was regarding his thoughts on qualified immunity. So this is what he said to Black Press USA. It says, in a one-on-one interview with Black Press of America, Kennedy spoke about his relentless focus on combating environmental racism, ending qualified immunity for law enforcement officers, and addressing the alarming racial disparities within the American medical system. And so he's talking about ending qualified immunity in this system. And Kennedy said that Black Americans are going to be a principal priority for me, particularly in ending the fear of dangerous interaction with law enforcement. The article continues, says he also pledged to move to end qualified immunity, which protects police officers from personal liability in the event of a lawsuit. And he said there is no incentive for individuals to change bad behavior. We need systemic changes. We need to remove qualified immunity, which would make it necessary for an individual to consider his liability with every interaction Every good economic system should incentivize good behavior and punish bad behavior. We need to have that. So that's what Robert F. Kennedy Jr. said. Okay. Now,
I agree 100% with what he said right there.
Okay. Now, I want to get your thoughts on this because this happened a month later. So, here's what Robert F. Kennedy Jr. said a month later.
On your website, you said you want to remove qualified immunity and transform the police. What does that look like for you to transform the police?
Yeah, I don't, if it says on my website that we're going to remove qualified immunity, that's wrong.
On your website, it says transform the police. In an interview, you said you wanted to remove.
Yeah, I don't, that is an error. We do not, I do not want to, I don't think it's feasible to remove qualified immunity.
Okay.
I think the police are having a hard enough time hiring people right now, and that a lot of interactions that the police have nothing to do with civil rights or race, and we can't put each individual police officers in a position where anybody who has an interaction with them can then sue them individually. And
so you don't have any plans in place to remove qualified immunity?
No, I'm not going to remove qualified immunity, but I'm going to use the Justice Department.
Your thoughts?
I don't think America's any stranger to politicians saying one thing one day and saying the exact opposite the next day. It's disheartening, I guess, to hear him do that 180. I don't know if it's what kind of political movement he's trying to go with that, whether it's not offending people who back the blue, whether it's not offending the police unions, whether there's some sort of endorsement he's seeking, or some sort of some donors who don't want a certain message getting out. I'm not sure about that. But, that's why we're taking a citizen-initiated constitutional amendment and placing it on the ballot ourselves, because we've tried going through the politicians to get this ended here in Ohio, and it's you can't trust a politician. I'm sorry, but you can't. And it sounds like he was being very politicky.
Yeah.
It's. I wish I had more insight on that, but I guess it boils down to politicians are gonna politic.
Absolutely, that's the best way to put it. So you basically just went into how you want to circumvent politicians in order to get qualified immunity as law within your state of Ohio. If you can go over that, exactly how are we going to get that done in Ohio? Because one of the things that I appreciate is a lot of times when states start to do this especially from a Citizen Ballot Initiative perspective, this also gives ideas to other peoples of other states, namely like my state of Florida, that would give us the idea, hey, we're sick and tired of getting our heads bashed in by police and getting shot in the back. Why don't we just end qualified immunity instead of trying to get a politician to do it or trying to elect an attorney general or a state attorney to do it? We'll just do it ourselves. So can you explain like how that process goes about and what's needed in order to get this process going?
Sure. And there's about 26 states out there that allow for some sort of citizen-initiated constitutional amendment or law. We have the great fortune, thanks to people who worked hard over 110 years ago to give us this right to place an amendment on the ballots. Currently, as it stands, the process is that you have to get your language first that you want to be put in the Constitution or put in the law. Then you have to write a summary for it, and both of those are typically done by attorneys. And then you go out and you collect 1,000 signatures to submit that summary to the Attorney General. The Attorney General either approves the summary language and certifies it, or he rejects it. After Attorney General approval, it goes to the ballot board here in Ohio. So the ballot board determines whether what you're proposing is one single issue and should appear on the ballot as one single issue, or if it's multiple issues, and if you should collect signatures for separate issues. After the ballot board makes its determination, then you have to collect signatures equal to 10% of the votes cast in the most recent gubernatorial election. In Ohio, we had about 4.2 million people vote in the last gubernatorial election. So you need about 420,000 ballot signatures here in Ohio to get something on the ballot. And with a standard validity rate of 50% here in Ohio for those signatures, because we do not have online petitioning, it's all in person, you have to get about double what you need. So we'll have to get about 850,000 signatures by the first week of July to get this on the November 2024 ballot. And then once you submit those signatures, then it is all hands on deck, getting the word out about this, convincing Ohio voters that this is something that we ought to have in Ohio, that a government accountable to the people is important for us here, and just getting those people out to vote.
Yeah. So I just want to share here the amendment that you guys actually have on your website, the Ohio Coalition to End Qualified Immunity, and it's actually available for PDF download. So if you guys would like to, especially if you're in Ohio, I highly recommend you guys actually get this and share this so that you guys can, so people in Ohio, or if you have family in Ohio, friends in Ohio, what have you, share this with them and share why ending qualified immunity is actually beneficial to all the people of Ohio. Because if anybody believes in holding people accountable, especially state representatives of the state, so whether it be police and law enforcement, or you could be represented by the state, in a different, entity, and they may do you wrong in a certain way, and you want to actually, hold them accountable. You can do that, hold them personally accountable by ending qualified immunity. And it will force them to actually be more careful in how they deal with citizens. And don't we all want them to be more careful in how they deal with us? That's the question I think a lot of people really need to ask. Like, do you want police to be more careful?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And that's honestly, it's pretty wonderful that exact question there is, do you want police to be careful? Do you want them to respect your rights? And that's where we're not getting, not just people on the left, not just liberals, and not just, moderates. We're also getting pretty right-wing people who, there are some people in our coalition whom I disagree on a great many things with them. But there are people, the MAGA patriot groups, as they call themselves, they're on our side with this too.
Wow. Okay.
Which is, they say politics makes strange bedfellows. And it's very true, especially with this issue. And I'll track back to New Mexico again, how they ended it through the state legislature. That was a joint lobbying effort by ACLU, Ben & Jerry's Campaign to End Qualified Immunity, and Koch brothers' dark money group, Americans for Prosperity. They all yes, the Koch brothers' dark money group, Americans for Prosperity, worked together with ACLU and Ben & Jerry's Campaign to End Qualified Immunity to lobby the state legislature of New Mexico to end qualified immunity in the state of New Mexico. And they were successful. It is, like they say, politics makes strange bedfellows. There are some organizations you would never expect to come together on any single issue, and they are coming together to end qualified immunity.
Okay, Kyle, pardon my French, but that was a mind fuck right now. So you basically just told me that billionaires helped end qualified immunity?
Yes, absolutely.
Because the police work for the people who own the properties. And I don't know how I feel about it. I mean, it's obviously a good thing.
Mm-hmm. Hey.
I was not expecting to be gobsmacked on my own show today.
It's and I will say Americans for Prosperity has been a great great ally in this fight here in Ohio. I mean, when it comes to criminal justice reform, apparently they're pretty on point. They worked with ACLU here in Ohio last legislative session to try and end cash bail in the state of Ohio. The legislature did not like what they were doing and decided to put an amendment to the Ohio Constitution on the ballot to put cash bail in our Constitution, and it passed, which that they outmaneuvered ACLU and the Koch brothers on that one. But
wow. I
mean, I love finding all these allies, and especially when ACLU and Ben & Jerry's and AFP work together on that one single issue, they might find other issues that they agree on.
I mean,
and work together to get those passed.
Look, I honestly if
I'm not asking you to say the billionaires are the good ones.
No, I understand. But my thing is like, if you can talk them into doing something that's actually for the good of the people, I'm going to applaud it. Because, look, that's how you do it. Sometimes you can actually talk people who you have a lot of disagreements with into moving into the same direction as you. There was, like, for instance, I'm a big proponent of a full nationalization of our healthcare system. And you can actually argue a full nationalization of our healthcare system from a right-wing perspective. It's actually not that difficult. The thing is, you just have to know the facts and figures. And so, for instance, talking about ending qualified immunity is a personal responsibility kind of direction. It's like, okay, yeah, you need to be responsible for the actions that you take as a police officer, just like anybody else. And a lot of people on the right will actually get on board with that. And so really, qualified immunity is more of a corporate protection of the police force that protects private property, rather than a conservative or right-wing type of. It's more of a top-down type of policy than a left-right policy.
I would agree with that. Yes.
So that's what it feels like to me. One of the things that I actually want to do, because I typically do not highlight comments, but there was some comments from Roger Meadows. He connected with you guys a few weeks ago on Rockfin. I'm sorry, on he connected with you guys regarding the ballot initiatives that you are trying to pass in Ohio. And he was the one that actually was, that recommended, me to talk to you, which I am very glad that he did. He had a couple comments as well to say. Roger Meadows, thank you so much for the tip. He says, it is important for everyone to take note that they are specifically running this initiative as an amendment to be ratified into the Ohio Constitution, not running it as a law, which would mean the government can come back and repeal or alter to weaken it without having to ask the voters, unlike they would if it was approved, ratified as an amendment. If you want to just comment on that just for a second.
Oh, yeah, and that's 100% the reason why we're pursuing the constitutional amendment route and not an amendment to the Ohio Revised Code, because you can pass something one day, and like Roger said, you can turn the state legislature, which is a Republican supermajority, can turn around the next day and say, actually, we don't like that. We're either going to neuter it, gut it, or get rid of it entirely.
So So that adds weight to it. That makes it more stronger. It's like, yeah, no, you guys can't really do that. It makes it part of the fundamentals of the law rather than making it kind of a low-hanging fruit that they can just, turn over.
Right. If this passes and they wanted to change it or repeal it, they would have to place an amendment on the ballot for us Ohio voters to vote on. The only way you can amend the Ohio Constitution is by having voters decide that, yes, we want to amend our Constitution.
Gotcha. And just to let you guys know, here in Florida, we also have a Republican supermajority. So we have a majority in the state house. We have a supermajority in the state house, I think. No, I think it's in the Senate, the Florida Senate, and then in the House we have a majority. And then we also have the governor, who is DeSantis. So, yikes! But yeah, so let me see. Roger also says it is not enough for states like Maryland.
I think Maine is ME, if I'm not mistaken.
I always get them mixed up. So Maine, Idaho, Washington, Wyoming, Alaska, Utah, to have the Citizen Ballot Initiative right, but only for voters to pass their own laws. They must push further and fight to get candidates in the state legislature, preferably independent, to hold leverage that would force a legislative initiative to vote to place initiatives before voters to ratify that would allow them to enshrine their own rights. If you want to speak on that a little bit.
Yes, I would say on the, I wholeheartedly agree. Right now, party politicians, they oftentimes put party over politics or the division between the two sides over what's best for the people, and sometimes what these politicians even actually believe. It's very difficult, though, to get an independent. Thank you, Comrade Kitty. I will. You can go to oceqi.org/volunteer to sign up to volunteer for signatures. We definitely need all the volunteers we can get. But circling back to independent candidates, it is almost impossible to get an independent elected here in Ohio because they don't have that party infrastructure backing their candidacy. They have to get more signatures than party candidates to get on the ballot. And it's just, you have to break that voter mindset of Republican and Democrats to actually get an independent elected, because oftentimes voting for an independent or a third party candidate is seen as wasting your vote or throwing away your vote. And I know Rank the Vote Ohio is seeking to get ranked choice voting here in Ohio, so that, you can say there's independent, Democrat, Republican, you can vote your first choice independent and your second choice, either the Republican or the Democrat. So if that independent doesn't win, your vote automatically instant runoff goes to your second choice. And, he said, Roger also stated that, libertarians like the Koch brothers, like Larry Sharpe and Ron Paul, want to end qualified immunity. And that's very true. It was actually the Libertarian Congressman Justin Amash who authored the qualified immunity bill, and he and Ayanna Pressley were the two who spearheaded that effort in the federal Congress. Obviously got nowhere. We still have qualified immunity. But yes, I would say yes, it is a waste trying to work with the lawmakers oftentimes, especially on this issue.
Of course. In fact, let me read the tip that Roger left on Rockfin. He says, the Kochs and the libertarians want to end qualified immunity is a big in the libertarian community. Larry Sharpe, Ron, and Rand Paul wish to end it as well. Kyle, never waste your time talking with lawmakers when you can do it yourself. All they will do is stonewall you from getting on the ballot. I saw the same thing with the sponsor for Massachusetts public banks and Medicare for All, stonewalled voters from putting it on the ballot. He says Florida also allows for citizen ballot initiatives for amendments. However, unfortunately for Florida, it's 60% required for approval. I'm glad Ohio voters came out last month and shut that down. So thank you very much.
Yeah. And I'm not sure if you and your listeners are familiar with what he's referencing and voting it down last month. The Ohio General Assembly placed an amendment to the Ohio Constitution on the ballot for us to vote on an illegal August special election that they had outlawed a year or two ago because there was such low voter turnout. It would make it to where instead of requiring a 50% vote, simple majority to pass these constitutional amendments at the ballot, it would require 60% of the vote. And then it would also expand, it would also restrict the petitioning to where instead of getting 5% of the votes cast in the last gubernatorial election from 44 out of 88 counties, you would have to get that from all 88 counties. And then it would have also removed, in Ohio, we have a 10-day grace period. If you don't get enough signatures in your initial submission, you have 10 days to make up for that. This would have gotten rid of that. So say you came up 12 signatures short in one county. That's thousands, if not tens of thousands of volunteer hours wasted. That is oftentimes millions of dollars wasted. It was a very vindictive thing for the General Assembly to do. It would have made it pretty much impossible to get anything on the ballot through a citizen-initiated process here in Ohio. And I'm glad we came out and defeated it. The Ohio Coalition and Qualified Immunity is one of the opponents to that. Common Cause, League of Women Voters, all these organizations, and surprisingly enough, it's maybe the only time we will ever be on the same side, the FOP here in Ohio came out against it.
See ya.
It's
the FOP.
The FOP came out against it. Yes.
What? I should have put some liquor in this tea. I should have got me a hot toddy. No, I was not expecting you to be throwing all these curveballs to me today, Kyle.
Listen, Ohio is just a curveball state. I'm not doing anything. I'm just speaking the truth here.
Part of me wants to be like, are you bullshitting me?
No, the list of opponents to issue one are online. Anybody can look it up. The Koch brothers working with ACLU to end qualified immunity in New Mexico can definitely look that up. Ben and Jerry's praises AFP in their press release about ending qualified immunity in New Mexico. I mean, Ohio is such a fantastic state when it comes to politics because on the surface, there's a lot of polarization. The politicians polarize a lot. But when it comes down to it, our organizations in the state as a whole and the people in this state, we get down to it. And we say, okay, this is BS. We need to get rid of it. And typically we see through, the propaganda when it comes to state issues.
I am so glad you do, because that's pretty awesome. I mean, the fact that you can get, essentially your political enemies to, join forces with you in order to really combat this, that gives me hope, actually, because a lot of times you have some people who may be on the right and they, like, for instance, there was a physician, I forget his name, but he's a Republican and he came out for single payer healthcare, basically saying that single payer healthcare is actually a much better system than the system that we have now. And so Wendell Potter, I think his name was Dr. Wendell Potter, he came out for single payer healthcare, which is a left position when it, in our eyes, but he argues it from a right-wing position. And so just because you live in a red state, do not sit there and go, well, these people, they want to back the blue. They never want to do this. No, because a lot of times, a lot of people believe in personal accountability in these states. And so and you never know, there may be some people who are on the right that have actually been abused by the state, by police, that are saying, you know what, they shouldn't have this. So do not allow that thinking of saying, oh, I'm in a red state, I can't allow this to happen. And if you're in a blue state, even more so, right? So it doesn't matter. People actually believe that people should be held accountable for their actions, especially when it comes to how they deal with citizens.
Oh, yeah. And it surprises me that more blue states haven't ended qualified immunity.
Right?
What's California doing? What's New York doing?
What's that about?
What's Vermont doing? I wish I knew the answer to that. I've been focused on Ohio.
Of course.
This whole time, we've got a lot going on here. You could take up an entire lifetime of a person. I hope it doesn't take up my lifetime. But, there are so many states where it seems like it would be much easier to get something like this passed. Yeah. And I don't know if there's just not the initiative there, if there's no real movement to get that done. But, we're hoping to start a national conversation here with this. Qualified immunity needs to be a household term. People need to know what it is all over this country, and they need to know how it impacts our system of justice, how it affects the trust that people have in our public institutions, and the integrity of our public institutions.
Definitely. So, yeah, as far as getting this overturned, as a constitutional amendment, I think that honestly, this is, as religious people say, they're doing God's work. So I would just like to share this in the chat as well to people who are wanting to volunteer within getting this going. Share this widely and explain to people. And it's easy, because the crazy part about it is that they actually did all the work. You guys did all the work for people to explain why they should be against qualified immunity. I love that you did this, and this is something that I just want to share just really quick, because you guys actually did this for people. It says, what is qualified immunity, and then why end it? So the work is already done for you. And then it talks about the timeline of examples about qualified immunity, like 2020, the death of George Floyd. 2019, Supreme Court declines to hear a case that would have clarified the scope of qualified immunity. And so it goes all the way down to 1967. So for Pearson versus Bray. So this also gives the timeline. So you have a great resource here regarding qualified immunity as well.
Oh, yeah. We hope to equip people as much as possible to not just educate themselves, but to educate the people around them, the people, their family, their friends, their communities, their colleagues. We need to be having this conversation. We need to be having it everywhere, honestly. And if anybody listening wants to get involved, wants to, take some sort of action to end qualified immunity in Ohio, you can sign up to volunteer on our website. It's oceqi.org. If you're not in Ohio, you can always donate. You can follow us on social media. You can amplify our social media posts. You can amplify the videos like this podcast that we're on. You can share it far and wide so people can actually hear the conversation going on about ending qualified immunity in Ohio.
Definitely. I just wanted to ask you, have you ever heard of the website 10 Demands for Justice?
I don't believe I have.
Okay, I'll share it with you really quick. Of course, a lot of people know I'm part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. One of my colleagues on Revolutionary Blackout Network, his name is Nick Cruz. He's actually one of the co-founders. of 10 Demands for Justice, along with Zoya and as well as the rapper Awkward. They actually came up with a website called 10 Demands for Justice, The Road to Abolition. So they are police abolitionists and for all intents and purposes. And so they also go over the demands for justice. And the first one, it says defund the police and reallocate resources, demilitarize the police, eliminate discriminatory policing and sentencing, institute complete law enforcement transparency. It sees independently investigate all crimes, representation, oversight, and safety measures, and strategic counter-protest violence. It talks about reparations and the war on drugs and carceral punishment. But ending qualified immunity is actually part of this one. I think it's under number 4. It says, let me see. It says create an independent database for police crimes, brutality, and misconduct. Implement independent community-led police department reviews and data. Require public reporting of all police records and schedules. Immediately terminate and eliminate pensions of any officer found guilty of manipulating data, covering their badge, turning off their body cam or dash cam, or illegally stopping a citizen from filming. And so this actually goes into a lot of what is in line with ending qualifying immunity as well. And so this is actually a great resource as well. There are videos that actually explain what each demand entails. And so, if you want to just give it a look in your own personal time, I'll send you the link. But just wanted to let you guys know that there's also other resources that work in tandem with things like ending qualified immunity as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll definitely give it a look.
Yeah, so I just wanted to share that with you as well. But one of the things that I want to encourage people to do is to make sure that you go to that website. Apologies that Miss Cynthia was not able to make it, but she's a new great grandmother today.
Yes, she is.
Yeah, so that's a good reason to miss out. So I became a great uncle. So look, I would have skipped out today too if my great nephew was being born today. So yeah, I definitely want to congratulate her on the new addition to the family too. So I want to make sure I do that too to Miss Cynthia. And so if you guys can go to oceqi.org. So I'm putting that up there so that you guys can see that as well, because it is important that you guys I also shared in the chat. So if you guys already have the link, as well as the link is also in the description below too. So any other final thoughts that you wanted to share with the audience as well regarding getting this draconian type of policy ended? Like, what would your final thoughts like to be?
I would say look into qualified immunity more. Sign up to volunteer if you can here in Ohio. Sign up to follow us on social media. Donate if you're able to. Share interviews like this. Get the word out. Start movements in your own state if you're able to. We need to end qualified immunity. We need to end it nationwide. And sometimes if politicians aren't going to do the work that we elect them to do, then we have to do the work ourselves.
Beautifully said. Thank you so very much, Mr. Kyle Pierce, for joining. Kyle Pierce, of course, is the director. He is the director for the Ohio Coalition to End Qualified Immunity. And so thank you so very much to Mr. Kyle Pierce for coming on. And I hope to have you guys on in a few months to see the progress. And so we can continue to talk about this issue as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for having us on. We'd love to be back, give you a bigger status update, how we're doing and what the roadmap is going to look like.
Thank you so very much. And give my greetings and my congratulations to Miss Cynthia.
Absolutely. For sure.
All right. Thanks a lot.
All right. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye. All right. So that was a wonderful conversation. I am very, excited to be able to have this conversation. As you guys know, that I am a big proponent of doing whatever we can in order to make sure that people who are disenfranchised within our communities, that we liberate ourselves from the stranglehold of what a lot of police and state actors do to us. I am one of those that am an abolitionist, is really, to rethink policing and public safety in a way where it actually benefits us rather than the people at the top. And so one step towards that is ending qualified immunity. They're doing the damn thing out there in Ohio, which I am very excited about. I think this was very important to show, not just to people internationally, but also here in Florida as well, because that's also very important. Is that Miss Cynthia there? I see. Okay, I'll bring you back on just a second.
This is Cynthia Brown, founder and chair of the Ohio Coalition to End Qualified Immunity. She is a powerhouse.
She came in at the last minute. She was like, "Hey, let's come on in. How you doing?"
Fine, thanks. I know he did real good, Sarah.
Mm-hmm. So it's so nice to finally meet you and to talk to you a little bit. Just to as the final thoughts before we head on out, I just would like to ask you, what was your motivation and what was the main driver to you for what was the main motivation and driver to for you to want to end qualified immunity? Was there a particular situation that happened in your life or something that you saw that really affected you?
Yes, my main motivation was the loss of my nephew, who was actually killed by Columbus police in 2017. He was the first body cam case, period, in the state of Ohio, where you saw a man get killed on camera and take his last breath. As a matter of fact, they lowered the volume down for the first 60 seconds and they covered the camera up 5 times too, so the public couldn't see what they were doing. So they shot my nephew twice in his back. When he hit the ground, they shot him in his face and in his neck. Of course, officers were found justifiable killing. They got qualified immunity. They said they feared for their life. So that's what started me down this journey, looking for police accountability, because my family got 0 zip.
Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Wow.
And we also have another. Wait a minute. We also have another committee chair. Her husband, Sean Rowe, was killed by police too. He's white, so this doesn't go black-white. This is a human issue. That's how we look at it. He was shot 8 times in his own home after he'd done 2 tours in Iraq, Iran. He was suffering from post-stress traumatic syndrome, and they got a call. What kind of call is that? Like a?
He was swatted by his neighbor, making up false stories, calling 911, and eventually they put a sting operation together. And I mean, they used a mortar on his house. They left a hole in his roof. They repaired exactly 0 of the damage that they did, and Jenny Sue Rowe, his widow, is having to live with that reality every single day when she wakes up and she sees the damage still done to her house.
These stories are so important because they really take us from above and put us at ground level when it comes to why these policies need to end. Because I couldn't imagine that happening. One of my brothers experienced police brutality a few years ago, and I don't think he really saw any type of restitution from it. But he's still alive, right? He's still alive. He's still well, and he's okay. And so when it comes to stories like this, this just, I mean, the outrage, it really is what I feel that drives you both into this work, because I just couldn't imagine, how is your family doing since then, as far as that crime that was committed against your nephew?
Well, he leaves behind 4 children, and they're going to be fatherless to a senseless, murder. So at the end of the day, his mom just has to learn to, deal with it. She goes day by day, some good days, some bad days. But we want to prevent any more, excuse me, loss of life and get this, ballot initiative passed.
Yeah. Look, like I said to everybody in the audience, if you guys have not, if you're not in Ohio, if you guys can donate, please make sure to donate. If you are unable to, you still have a voice. Take the link, share it. Just talk about how qualified immunity is ending. It needs to be ended so that we can actually hold police accountable for the actions that they take. And if you just word it that way, a lot of people can get on board with that. And just like what Kyle was saying, that, they have people who are on the right that are on board with it too. So yeah, wow. That hurts, man. That really does. But I just want to thank you for being on, and showing and then sharing your story as well. So we got the personal side, as well as we got the informational side as to why ending qualified immunity is so important. Before you guys head off, Miss Cynthia, what is your thoughts that you would like to share before we head out?
I would like to share with the audience how important it is to win, qualified immunity, not only in Ohio, but in America. We know that the George Floyd policing act stalled in the Senate because it caused the filibuster. They didn't have the votes. So therefore, it's up to each individual states. And like Kyle said, if the states are able to put it on the ballot, we encourage them to watch us in Ohio and use our success as case precedents moving forward, because we're claiming victory here in Ohio. So like Kyle said, you can volunteer, donate that $19.82, because all dollars add up to help us, in our quest for liberty here in Ohio.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so very much, Miss Cynthia and Mr. Kyle, for coming on and sharing your knowledge as well as your experience. This really, it's really humanized it further. And I think that a lot of people will get a great benefit out of knowing this, so that they can push for it in their state, so we can get this done nationwide. So thank you so very much for coming.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you so much. You both have a wonderful day, and congratulations to you, Miss Cynthia, on the new addition to your family. I am so excited for you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay.
All right. So now we're finished, but that was also, whoa, Josh, I'm an emotional person. So when stories like that happen, I get like, the sense of outrage really affects you, So I think that's really important. But please make sure to go to that website. Again, I will be sharing it in the description. This is already in the description, but I'll be sharing it in the chat so that you guys can also have that as well. So let me go to some of the messages in the chat. First off, we're going to start off with Pittsburgh Dude says RFK complaining on supporting qualified immunity, just like he did on supporting Roger Waters. Yeah, he wussed out on that one. So thank you so very much, because that was just wrong of him. It's like doing the politician, back and forth is just sad to me. It shouldn't have happened, but he's a politician. What do you expect? Roger Meadows says time for CBI Amendment to abolish all political parties. Absolutely. That would also be a benefit. Thank you so very much. Thank you so much for the $2 super chat. Extra booyah. Uncle Warren's in the chat saying hashtag and qualified immunity. Love you, JB and fam. Thank you so very much as well to Extra booyah. Also, Roger Meadows, thank you so much for the super chat. Says just donated $10, kicking off monthly charge. Let's go. So awesome. Thank you so very much for those as well. So let me go to the rest of the chat just to see what others are saying as well. This was deeply important. Let me see here. Let me see. Let me see. Comrade Kitty says far right wingers used they're coming close costing taxpayer billions in lawsuits angle. Oh yeah, you know what? That's also a really good one. Yeah. Costing taxpayers billions. It's like, yeah, instead of actually suing the institution, it's like, okay, then we're going to pass it off onto the people who's actually responsible for the action that's being taken. So yeah, that's also a really good angle as well, Comrade Kitty. Thank you so very much for that. Cobra Commander says, I'm heartbroken and angry like being paralyzed. Absolutely. That story just hit me like a ton of bricks. So yeah. And so the driving force behind these different type of organizations, a lot of times that's what we need to do is ask people, like, why did you start this? What drove you to do these type of organizations in order to do these different types of actions? And people will tell you. And when they tell you, you listen, and then you find out, oh my gosh, I did not know. And to a lot of people, especially white people, a lot of white people do not have as much interaction with the police, especially those of you who are affluent. This is why it's important to listen to people who are in disenfranchised communities, even other poor white people, because then you start to find out the injustices in the system that you may not be privy to. Because now it is a point to open your eyes to see what's going on. So if you know people who are affluent, who will say that they back the blue, show them the injustices that are happening in their communities by hands of police and say, this is what they're doing. Do you think it's fair that they do not get held accountable for the crimes they're committing? If you feel that people like us as private citizens should be held accountable by the crimes that we commit, then how the more so that somebody who's in a job that enforces the law should be held accountable for the laws that they violate. And that's the point. So, thank you so very much for coming in. Now, if you guys have not, give a like for the stream. Just thank you so very much to everybody. That pushes me out into the algorithm. So thank you so very much as well. Also, if you guys have not, then you guys can also go on and subscribe to my Substack. You guys can go to jaybefaunt.substack.com. You guys can get email notifications to know whenever I go live or upload clips or put out articles. So thank you so very much for that as well. I also would like to thank all the patrons on Patreon and Coffee. Without you guys, I would not be able to do this type of work that I'm doing. So thank you so very much to all the patrons on Patreon and Coffee. Just to give you guys an update regarding that, I also have updated tiers on my Patreon as well, just to let you guys know. And as far as the tiers are concerned, actually, let me enlarge this. I just want to share with you guys that now I also am giving out merch for every single tier that is at $10 and up. So if you guys, so the tiers for membership are JB members, which is $1 a month. So if you guys, just want to do $1 a month, you guys can do that. We also have the solidarity tier, which is $3. You have the comrade tier, which is $5 a month. At $10 a month, then you also have the Jaybefaunters. So you guys actually get an exclusive mug, and you guys get a patron shout out. I'm sorry, $5 a month, you guys get an exclusive sticker. $10 a month, you guys get a mug. $15 a month, you guys get a sticker and a mug. Super duper Jaybefaunters, you get an exclusive sticker and a t-shirt. And then for mega Jaybefaunters, you get a sticker, t-shirt, and tote bag with the Jaybefaunt Show logo on it. So just letting you guys know that those are the tiers. And thank you so very much for that. Also, I would like to introduce new patrons as well. Thank you so much, new patrons, to Vanessa Elizabeth and James Arkuzivsky. Thank you so very much for becoming new patrons as well. Thank you so very much. So thank you so much for becoming patrons as well. Also, just to let you guys know, I also have a new merch store. So if you guys would like to, you guys can go to Bonfire and look up the Jaybefaunt store. So you guys can get merch on there at my merch store as well. It's now available in live on YouTube. So now we just went over the subject of holding cops accountable with Miss Cynthia Brown and Kyle Pierce, which had just joined earlier. So that was a wonderful discussion. But now we're going to get into our next discussion. Oh, snap! As you see, we have the Infinity Gauntlet there. I know, I'm silly like that. But this is going to be an interesting subject, because why do we have the BRICS countries as Infinity Stones? Oh, snap. I know I'm a little bit late on this, but I wanted to talk about this because this was extremely interesting, and it's really going to have a big effect on us on the world stage. So let's talk about it. BRICS. Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. These are a block of nations that have come together in order to circumvent Western hegemony, Western influence, and declare their own self-determination and sovereignty within their own borders by teaming up with one another so that they can have less persecution from the West. And so a lot of people right now are having their eyes peeled on what's the next move from this block of nations that has been coming together and trying to maneuver things so that they can no longer be held basically by the throat of the West. So as far as what's going on right now, there has been a couple of weeks ago a meeting in Johannesburg, South Africa, where the BRICS nations actually held a summit where they actually came together to talk about an expansion of BRICS. So beyond, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, now it is expanded officially from 5 nations to 11 nations. That's right. It is more than double in size, which now has the Western nations shaking in their boots. So let's get into it. So first of all, I can't believe I'm doing this, but it's going to get done. Look, I got to do this. There's a song that actually goes in line with this. You guys are going to crack up but I'm going to do it. We're going to show it. And so I cannot wait. So let's share this. All right. So let me get this ready. Because when I heard this, I was just like, no way. Somebody didn't make a song about BRICS. And lo and behold, they did. So yeah, let me share this with you guys because you guys are going to crack up. All right. So, and I don't think I've seen anybody else share this. So this is going to be hilarious. So let's go.
BRICS. Brazil BRICS, Russian BRICS, the Indian BRICS, Chinese BRICS, South Africa BRICS. They ain't talking Gucci man, but they've been talking BRICS. So these 5 countries came together with the intent to make America's dollar equivalent to 0 cent. If that happened, even wealthy people won't even be rich, because everything we've ever known quadruples in the expense. Picture this, for 1 BRICS dollar, America needs 55, which means they gonna overcharge for all of their supplies. Your Jordans made in China, price range by different size. You will have to multiply that price range by 55. Do the math. 300 times 55 equals more people struggling to survive. Equals more robberies, crime super high. Equals more people in danger, more people die. The power of the American dollar is at stake, because they want to dethrone our dollar till it deflates, which means everything you buy or own will inflate. So the lifestyles we've grown to know will erase. Baby, educate yourself. Come up with a plan. Find a couple friends and all of y'all pitching for some land. Learn to plant. Learn to be a natural human once again. Because wherever BRICS begin, America wealth could end. BRICS.
What? Gucci home man. BRICS. Oh man, yo, so this is what's going on. Okay, so let's get serious, because this is actually something I think a lot of people really need to be up to speed on when it comes to the world stage, as far as U.S. hegemony and how in Western hegemony, and how the world basically saying, especially those in the global South, no more are you guys going to be calling the shots of the world. So BRICS nations, of course, like I said before, met in Johannesburg, South Africa last few weeks, and they approved recently the countries of Argentina, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE. So now those countries are going to be joining, and the official membership starts this January. So January of 2024. So we're going to go to Twitter, and there's a video that's shared by Hotspot of President Cyril Ramaphosa, who actually makes the official announcement. So this is going to be the South African president that actually makes the official announcement. And we'll get into there, and we'll start there, and then we will continue on. Let's begin.
As the 5 BRICS countries, we have reached agreement on the guiding principles, standards, criteria, and procedures of the BRICS expansion process, which has been in discussion for quite a while. We have consensus on the first phase of this expansion process, and other phases will follow.
So I want you guys to pay close attention, because he said that was the first phase. First phase. And other phases will follow. So this is a very important point, because a lot of times people think, well, BRICS will happen. It'll be just these member nations, and then that's what is going to be going forward. BRICS said, look, we are expanding, but if you guys think that this is going to be it? No. In the words of P. Diddy of Bad Boy, I thought I told you that we won't stop. I thought I told you that we won't stop. So this is what's going on as far as BRICS. This is why we need to pay attention and keep our eyes peeled on the developments of BRICS on the world stage as we move forward, because it's going to grow. So let's continue and let's see more of what President Ramaphosa says.
Will follow. We have decided to invite the Argentine Republic, the Arab Republic of Egypt, the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, the Islamic Republic of Iran, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates to become full members of BRICS. The membership will take effect from the 1st of January 2024.
So there you have it. Confirmation from the horse's mouth from the president of South Africa himself, a BRICS member. So this is what's happening. This is going to be massive. This is huge news that really a lot of people just are not really aware of. And so some people are kind of scared. They're saying, well, if this happens, then our prices are going to go up exponentially, things like that. This may be a little bit more further off just to quell some of the concern, but really the concern really should be to the government themselves as well as to the wealthy and the corporations within the West, I think. So, yeah. So massive developments really that are happening on the world stage. So I'm going to be sharing, actually, I already have it up. So I'm going to be sharing this article that's going to go a little bit more in depth about it. So this is going to be out of the New York Times. I know, yes, they are corporate media, but they actually give a little bit more detail about this, which I want to get into. And so we will dissect through the corporate media just to glean the facts. So it says the BRICS group announces new members expanding its reach. Argentina, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia have been invited to join the club of emerging nations, strengthening its role as a geopolitical alternative to Western-led forums. Let's get into it. So Sasal says the five-nation BRICS club of emerging economies that came together to tilt the international order away from the West announces plans Thursday to expand its membership, feeding concerns about a growing global divide. Says the group said that Argentina, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, and United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia have been invited to join and that their membership would begin in January. The BRICS group announced that the expansion at a summit in South Africa that attracted a level of global interest rarely seen since its first meeting back in 2009. Back then, the group's name was BRIC, an acronym coined by economists at Goldman Sachs to describe a group developing nations with rapidly growing economies and populations. So that was Brazil, China, India, and Russia. South Africa would join a year later, adding the S to the acronym. Now, it is a formalized group that seeks to challenge the dominance of Western-led forums like the Group of Seven or the G7 and the World Bank. It says, but leaders of the member states have repeatedly said they do not want direct competition with these groupings, but rather to bring diversity amid increasing polarization. So, Xi Jinping, president of China, says this membership expansion is historic. It shows the determination of BRICS countries for unity and cooperation for the broader developing world. So that's what's going on in regards to BRICS as well. This now, as the expansion goes, this group stands to be more economically powerful than the G7. Now, as somebody who is still learning about foreign policy myself, some people may not know exactly what the G7 is. And some of you do know because you are more foreign policy astute, geopolitically astute as to what it is, but some people just do not know. So I would like to go in and actually talk about what the G7 is so that people can know what it is and why it's so important. So let's go here. So as people may know, the G7 stands for Group of Seven. So I just want to share this. So, I still had it up already. Okay. So let me share my screen really quick to share with you guys who the G7 is and why it's so important. That they're basically being beaten economically. What's this? Oh, okay. All right. So this is from the Council on Foreign Relations. So it says, what does the G7 do? It says the Group of Seven, G7, serves as a forum to coordinate global policy, but experts are increasingly questioning the group's relevance. So it says the G7 is an informal bloc of industrialized democracies. So the G7 consists of the United States, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, and the United Kingdom, the UK, that meets annually to discuss issues such as global economic governance, international security, and energy policy. Proponents say that the government's small and relatively homogeneous membership promotes collective decision-making, but critics note that it often lacks follow-through and excludes important emerging powers. What are those emerging powers? Those emerging powers are Russia. Russia was one. It says Russia belonged to the forum from 1998 to 2014 when the bloc was known as the Group of Eight or the G8, but was suspended following its annexation of Ukraine's Crimea region. The G7's future has been challenged by continued tensions with Russia and increasingly China, as well as by internal disagreements over trade and climate policies. And a sign of renewed cooperation, the G7 reached a historic agreement ahead of its 2021 summit, which was 2 years ago, to overhaul the global rules for corporate taxation. More recently, the G7 has imposed coordinated sanctions on Russia in response to war on Ukraine, including a cap on the price of Russian oil, which we all know has had a counter effect because now Russia has actually increased the value of its I think it's called the ruble. So its currency is actually increased in value because now Russia said, okay, so you guys are going to be sanctioning me when it regards to my oil and my gas. Okay, hold my beer. I'm going to China. Next thing you know, they started trading in Russian currency, and now the Russian currency is now increased in price, thus making Russia an even richer nation. So it had a counter effect. So it says, so let's go here. It says, the group also launched a major global infrastructure program to counter China's Belt and Road Initiative. Those issues, along with climate change, food insecurity, artificial intelligence, and nuclear weapons, led the agenda at the 2023 summit in Hiroshima, Japan. So why was the G7 formed? It says United States, France, Italy, Japan, the UK, and West Germany founded a group of six in 1975, provide a venue for non-communist powers to address pressing economic concerns, which included an inflation and a recession sparked by the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Communities, or OPEC, oil embargo. Canada joined the following year, and Cold War politics inevitably entered the group's agenda. So really, they're anti-communist Cold War group of nations. Says the EU has participated fully in the G7 since 1981. And so, of course, now they have basically stayed as G7, whereas it's like the G7 is like the more centralized group that oversees and wields the power, whereas it's, that's like the inner circle, and then you have the G20, which is a bit of the outer circle of also somewhat powerful nations, but the G7 is really the nucleus of that G20. So they're the ones that say, how the world is shaped regarding economic policies on the larger world stage. So that's what the G7 is. Okay. So here we go. So as far as the G7 and their GDP, or their gross domestic product, we are now learning that the BRICS nations actually exceed the GDP, or the gross domestic product of the G7. So this is how we're seeing how it is more powerful. So let me make sure I got, yep. Okay. So I have this ready. So this is actually going to give you guys a stark example as to how BRICS has become more powerful than the G7. So this is an animated chart, G7 versus BRICS by GDP. So I want to share with you guys, this is actually a video that's going to share how it is actually gotten to this point. So I'm going to expand this. So it says BRICS versus the GDP, GDP at purchasing power parity, percentage of world total. So we're starting off at 1992. So from 1992. Now, I want you guys to see this line at the top is the G7. All these colors at the bottom are BRICS nations. G7 GDP is at 45.71%. The BRICS combined is only at 16.5%. So you have 45%, or a little over 45.5% versus 16.5% of the gross domestic product of the world. Now, see how BRICS changes. Now, 93, it grows, it keeps growing. We're at 95, 96, 97. Now, if you see the G7 is actually decreasing, as G7 decreases, the BRICS nations increase at a commensurate rate. So now we're at 2005. And as you see, G7 is getting lower and lower, which makes the West more scared. Now the lines are about to converge. And by the time we reach 2014, they're basically closing on being equal. Now they're at equal at 2019. Now here's where the fear happens. Now, as you can see, forecast, the dotted line is 2023. Now, past 2023, we're seeing that BRICS has surpassed the G7. So Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa is now, these 5 nations are now exceeding the G7. And so by the time we hit 2028, BRICS is forecast to have 33% of the GDP, basically, versus the G7 having 27, a little over 27.5% of the world's GDP. So this is what's scaring the West. This is why they do not want BRICS to grow. And this is just only, by the way, BRICS countries, just the 5 countries. Just a couple of weeks ago, they expanded more than double their size. BRICS is now the BRICS 11. So now it is no longer just Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. I want you guys to realize how massive this is. Right? It is now Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, Argentina, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE. That's how massive this is. This is how important this is. And this measurement that we see is without those other 6 nations. So the West is terrified right now. Now, the terror is not out of the poor and the working people of the West, but the governments and the wealthy and the corporate powers that are now shaking in their boots. And this is why we need to actually be hopeful about this news. Because ultimately, it is the diminishing power of these Western nations that have a stranglehold, not just on the global South, but on the poor and working people within the West. That's why this is important. So what does this mean? So I want to give attention to a friend that also has had some people on to talk about this, Danny Haifong. Shout out to Danny Haifong on his channel, The Left Lens. If you guys have not, I would love for you guys, and I think you guys should, subscribe to Danny Haifong's channel, The Left Lens. And I will be sharing the link to this video in a second. But he has on Pepe Escobar and Michael Hudson to talk about the significance of what's happening in BRICS. And so we're going to get started right now. And the first person that's going to be starting off is Michael Hudson. And he's going to get his perspective as to what this means for the rest of the world and why this is so important. So, shout out to Danny Haifong for this.
Michael, please go.
Well, I think in one sense, this is a preliminary meeting to set the stage for what's going to come. And all that the BRICS can do at this point is make arrangements among themselves. But the real problem is, what is their collective strategy going to be to break from the U.S. and NATO garden, from the whole economic order that the United States has put in place since 1945? And that requires creating sort of a core group that's going to write up the basic principles. And in a way, what they need is a manifesto. They need to say, here are our aims, and here are some basic principles of how we're going to operate. And I think they wanted to keep the group fairly small for the time being, so that they other countries will have a choice. If you join the BRICS group, the expanded BRICS, you will be part of this overall new order, and it's going to mean breaking ultimately from the U.S.-centered order, because you cannot have the kind of order that the BRICS countries were discussing at this week's meeting, and at the same time remain subject to the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, neoliberal economics, and what President Putin himself called the debt trap that is preventing countries from taking an economic independence. President.
So that's one of the biggest points, is changing the world order away from what we call a unipolar world order. So basically meaning that the United States is the one that's been calling the shots for the world, which is really in an anti-democratic way, because the United States should not be the one, the single nation, the nation that's only 5% of the world's population calling the shots. But that's how it's been. The United States and the West are a very small block of the entire world. They're not the majority. They are the minority. So as you guys know, here in the United States, as you guys can see, who runs the United States? It is not us. You guys all know this as well. You guys are all very politically astute. The United States is not ran by the people. It's not ran by the workers. It's ran by what we like to call the 1%, and sometimes the 1/10 of the 1%. This is also the exact same thing on the world stage from a nation perspective. So you have, for instance, like I said, the G7. And the G7 is a very small block of nations that actually determine how the world is governed. It is really how the world is ran, who determines how the world operates. So you have United States, France, Italy, Japan, UK, and Germany, right? And so because, you have these countries that are basically saying, okay, this is how the world's going to work. The world goes, well, wait a minute. What do we get a say in this? Why don't we get a say in this at all? And then these countries go, well, because we have the biggest economies. We can tell you guys how the world works. We can determine that because we're the ones with the most money. Meanwhile, if you look at these nations, the US, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, and the United Kingdom, they don't have that many resources. Their resources, well, with exception of the United States, their resources are scanty compared to the global South. Excuse me. If you look at, let's say, I think the 54 nations in Africa, they have a massive amount of resources. Massive. But if you look at the G7 and what they have compared, the United States gets some of its resources from the Middle East and Africa, which means that they are exploiting and basically stealing a lot of these resources, along with Canada. France, as we know, as we have been watching in the news, has been stealing the resources of Mali, Burkina Faso, Gabon, right? Niger. Germany also steals resources. They also extract resources as well. Italy also has been doing it, especially in the Horn of Africa. Japan also, they've been using their imperialist powers. And don't forget the UK. The UK is one of the worst actors. So yes, they have a lot of the money, but that money is based on resources that they have exploited from the global South. And the global South has not had a chance or the ability to really say, hey, you guys can't do this. Why? Because these countries in the G7 and at large the G20 really are the nations that actually have the most killing machines. So really the rest of the world is being held at gunpoint and being robbed of their resources. So really they don't have a voice. So that's what's going on right now. Just to expand on what Michael Hudson was saying. So we're going to go just a little bit further. And let's continue, because we're going to expand on something that a lot of people just don't have a grasp on. And I just want to help people have a grasp for this. So let's continue.
Putin gave a very good speech where he said that basically the countries, the colonial epoch of European colonialism has been replaced by financial controls, and that countries cannot be independent until they're financially independent. Well, easy for him to say, because the United States has forced him to be independent, is forcing China to be independent, and is driving all of the countries to be independent. But what his speech said was that the countries of the so-called global billion, he said, have gone to great lengths to preserve a unipolar world as it used to be. It suits them. They're the ones who benefit from it, and they're trying to replace international law with their own order. But nobody's seen the rules of this order. So what he pointed out is that this order is just a new kind of colonialism. And he specifically quoted Brazil's President Lula when he said that Lula mentioned the debt burden of the developing economies that they face. Of course, he said, on the one hand, there's this effort to siphon off all these resources, while the other hand, in terms of lending, the relations are engineered in a way that requires repaying these loans virtually impossible, so that these obligations can be viewed as mandatory indemnities rather than loan payments. Well, that threw down the gauntlet.
So as far as what was said by Putin, This basically means is that they are using financial institutions like the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, and the World Bank to really keep a stranglehold on the world so that they cannot use their own resources in order to grow. So one of the things that I wanted to do, and some people probably are not aware, but I wanted to share this as well as to what the IMF and the World Bank is and how it has a stranglehold on the world. So I'm going to share this really quick video. This gentleman explains what the IMF and the World Bank do and how they're ripping off poor countries who actually have the resources in order to do better, but because of these institutions, they can't do it.
Go to places like Africa. They don't have a lot of money. And they pitch them.
All right, so let me refresh this so we can hear right from the beginning.
What the IMF and the World Bank does to impoverished countries. So they go to places like Africa, they don't have a lot of money, and they pitch them this idea that if you take our billions and billions and billions of dollars, we can establish all these new businesses and your GDP is going to increase by 200, 300%. But the only catch is you have to allow American companies to be the ones who build these infrastructures. So then African countries take this money from the IMF, and then these American companies come over there and build all this stuff, but then it doesn't work out because they only gave them an infrastructure, but they didn't teach them how to run it. And now,
so basically, it's really just allowing capitalist entities to come in and build whatever they want. But the problem is that they get this infrastructure, they get these loans, they get the business from all the surrounding communities that they can buy from and they can charge from. But of course, they don't teach them how to, implement and use this infrastructure in the correct way. So let's continue.
now they're left in debt because all these fake promises of their GDP going up doesn't happen. And now the IMF come knocking on the door saying it's time to pay up. And these countries say, well, we ain't got the money. And the IMF says, oh, no worries. All you need to do is give us your natural resources.
Give us your bodies.
And so they just came in, putting them in a hard place and taking the very little that they have because they're stuck in a debt trap with the IMF.
So basically, it is a debt trap. And basically what they do is they say, okay, we're going to give you this money. But in order for us to give you this money, you have to change your policy regarding your resources in a certain way that benefits the West. And so they change it, but of course they have to say give their resources over to the West in order for them to be able to get this money. But of course, the money or the resources and the financial benefits from the resources actually don't go to the people. The resources and the benefits actually go to Western nations. I'll give you a good example. So countries like Mali have gold reserves. I'm sorry, they have gold mines, right? But those gold mines are not owned by the Malian government. They're owned by France. So even though Mali has the gold to be able to pay so that it can keep its people afloat, keep its people, doing well, it doesn't, because it is being basically, taken over by France. And so, the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, they basically operate on behalf of these Western governments in order to make it seem like they're actually doing something good for these poorer nations. But in reality, it's just a manipulation tactic in order to extract their resources and to keep these nations in debt so that they won't rise, they won't do better. And so it's really horrible on its face. And this is why BRICS is so necessary on the world stage. So Just wanted to give that as well, because a lot of times people are like, well, how does the IMF and World Bank actually work? And the thing is that they, it's loan sharking on an international scale, basically. That's what it is. International loan sharks. If you can figure that out, you got it. All right, so let's continue. And as far as this goes, so we're going to continue now.
At some point, that they couldn't really discuss publicly today, they're going to realize that if we're going to use our economic surpluses to develop our own infrastructure, our own government spending on basic needs, we cannot turn over our economic surplus to the Western holders of dollar debt. So
that's basically it. It's not taking any of your resources and using it to pay off the West. It's like, no, this is ours. We're going to use it for ourselves instead of having the West come in and invest. Invest what? UK ain't got shit. I'm gonna be real with you. The UK ain't got nothing. What can they give you? What can the US really give you? I mean, the US has some resources on their own, but they don't really have that much. Like, look, the West needs the global South. The global South don't need the West. See what I mean? And that's the point. But they don't want the global South to know that. Because now the global South is wising up. Just like workers are rising up against the owners of the means of production, right? The global South is waking up and going, oh, wait, we're the ones with the resources. We don't need y'all. Y'all need us. See how this is going? See? Now everything's starting to click, right? Okay. All right. Let's keep going, because this is great. Let's continue. I need to have Michael Hudson and Pepe Escobar on my show.
Things going to give, and they avoided talking about this. All they can really talk about now is how they can support mutual aid with each other, and we're still a bit far away from taking on the West, but that's going.
Did you hear what he said regarding the nations? Let's go back just a few seconds and listen to what he says. I want you guys to listen. This is very important.
They avoided talking about this. All they can really talk about now is how they can support mutual aid with each.
Support mutual aid. Have we talked about this on a more centered community level, right? We've talked about this on this channel. We talked about this on RBN. You hear other channels talking about mutual aid and how it helps the community to be able to develop what we like to call a dual power, right? That's very important, because in order to get away from the capitalist system, in order to get away from a system that's exploitative of us, we have to build a dual power, which means that we circumvent them and do it on our own. We save us. This is happening on a global scale with nations that have been exploited by the West. They're now a block of mutual aid. Think about BRICS as a mutual aid power on an international level. That now it makes sense, right? Now it makes sense that they're saying, oh, snap, you know what? We got a lot of resources between us. We don't need them. Let's come together and share amongst each other so that we can build ourselves up. We don't need the G7. We don't need the G20. We don't need the United States, Italy, Germany, Japan, UK. We don't need them. We got our own backs. This is why the U.S. and the West are terrified. Because here's the point. We are living in a mansion, but there's a very small few of people that are living in the suites and in the master bedroom. The rest of us globally are in the basement. And what are we doing in the basement? We're cooking the food. We're making the clothes. We're making the products. We're all down there, cramped, huddled in this hot-ass basement, trying to feed and do for the small group of people that are on the upper floors. That's what's going on. And we're realizing the rice is down here. The veggies are down here. The fruits are down here. The grain is down here. Right? What else is down here? What is down here in the basement with us? Right? We have the gold down here, the uranium down here, the platinum, the cocoa, the bauxite, the manganese, the natural gas, the oil, the lithium. We got it all down here with us. We don't need to send it upstairs. We just need to keep it down here with us and do it all and create it all ourselves. That's what's going on. This is why the people upstairs are terrified. Because if we cut their resources off, what the hell do they have? They ain't got diddly squat. This is why they're scared. Germany's not that big. The UK definitely is not that big. Yes, the US is big, but as far as their resources are concerned, they can't match what the BRICS nations got. Even before they had the addition of the other 6 nations. This is why it is dangerous to the West, but it is beneficial to everybody else. When you think about it that way, it makes sense, and it shows that they're building a dual power to circumvent the Western dominance and influence so that they can maintain their sovereignty and self-determination, managing their resources how they want to on their land. That's the point. And as somebody who is a communist, I want these nations to express their self-determination and sovereignty. Because that means that they can do it through a democratic process, right? Remember Bolivia. Remember what Elon Musk said regarding the lithium in Bolivia? We'll coup whoever we want, deal with it. This is basically Western dominance. And taking a country and saying, no, we're going to tell you how you deal with it, not you, your country, and the democratic process how you deal with it. We're not, no. We're going to tell you, this is ours. We're taking it for ourselves. That's called colonialism. That's called imperialism. But then Bolivia said, what the hell you will? And now they're democratically saying, we're going to tell you how we deal with our lithium. This is how we're going to do it. This is how we do it, right? And so they're basically saying, no, we're going to democratically decide as a nation how we manufacture and distribute our lithium. And if you want to get down with us, you have to pay the prices that we set as a market. And then when we sell it to you, then the money that we distribute from the sale of our lithium, we will evenly distribute to all of our people, not just to the 1% in our nation. Which means that it is a socialist policy, which means that the means of production is owned and distributed by the block of people, by the masses, by the workers in that nation. And that's how it works. But these countries, the G7 and largely the G20, they don't want people to see that. Because if the people see that, then that means that the people in their nations, like you and I, are going to get the wrong idea, which in reality is the right idea. The right idea being that we can do the same like a Cuba, like a Venezuela, like a Bolivia, like a Vietnam, like a DPRK. We can do the same things, which means that we can actually take the model of profit first and throw it away. Take away the ability for these corporations really to exploit us. That's the point. So I just want to thank, Michael Hudson for talking about that. That was great. Now let's go to Pepe Escobar and what he says. So we're going to actually, let me continue with Michael Hudson just a little bit, and then we'll go to Pepe Escobar. So let's go.
Each other, and we're still a bit far away from taking on the West, but that's going to be what's happening, and it's the political dimension that has not been discussed in the West at all. So I hope today we can talk about what the BRICS really meant politically. Foreign Minister Lavrov gave a wonderful comment. He said the West is talking only about the BRICS meetings as having an economic agenda. And he said, but that's belittling what we're doing. He said the West is treating us as an economic club, but it belittles its real significance. We're going to be a political club, and it takes a whole political restructuring in order to have an economic restructuring. So we're not talking about marginal differences. We're not talking about stopping simply at using each other's currencies and denominating our debt in each other's currencies with currency swaps. We're talking about a quantum leap, a basically altogether new structuring. And that's what the West doesn't believe. They believe what Margaret Thatcher said. There is no alternative. And this week's meeting is all about, yes, there is an alternative.
So basically they're saying no more. We are not going to sit here and let you set the terms of how we operate in our nations. And it's beautiful because that's what imperialism and colonialism does. It forces these less developed nations to heel to the demands of the West. And so now they're saying no more. This is it. You've had your chance and you didn't do right by us. So now we're going to take our own resources and we're going to take our own work and we're going to do it for ourselves. We save us on a global scale. That was beautifully said by Michael Hudson. I'm going to try to see if I can get his contact information to reach out. But yes, thank you so very much. So now we're going to move on to Pepe Escobar. So he is talking about President Lula of Brazil, just to let you guys know, and some of the things that President Lula has said, which is very interesting as well. Let me go there. Let me see. Whoop. Okay. So, because I'm not going to be playing this entire stream. I want you guys to actually watch it for yourselves, but just highlighting some of the things that was said by Michael Hudson and Pepe Escobar. So here we go.
He talked once again about a BRICS currency, but as Michael said, nobody got into details. First of all, because it's too early, and they don't have the people, the mechanism, the teamwork set up in place to start really analyzing it the way, for instance, the Eurasia Economic Union has, and Glaziev and Mityayev here in Moscow, which I plan to meet soon in the next few days. They have been working on this for over 3 years, in fact.
So he's basically talking about a BRICS currency, which a lot of people were talking about as of recently, and how that if you have a BRICS currency, that could diminish the value of the dollar, or what we like to call the petrodollar. And the thing is that if you diminish that currency, it could spell doom for a lot of people, especially a lot of businesses. But the thing is that that's kind of far off. That's not so close as people may think it is. A lot of times, you have a lot of people, especially within the venture capitalist circles, that are saying, oh my God, it's the beginning of the end if they have a BRICS currency, which they are working towards, which they are talking about. But it's not as close as people think. They're just, getting more nations on board with BRICS. But guaranteed, as we listen a little further, the writing is on the wall, and the end is nigh, especially for Western power. But yes, so that's basically what he's talking about. And this is what President Lula da Silva of Brazil was actually talking about. So let me continue. Let's see here. So let's continue to here. Okay. So let's go to right there. All right, let's continue.
Except the 3 Muslim nations. And there was a question of about Africa. They had only 2. That was the very last round of discussions. So they said, okay, who's going to be the next candidate? Everybody was talking about Algeria, but Algeria is practically a done deal. They have very good relations with both Russia and China, and they're going to be part of BRICS sooner rather than later, probably next year in the second batch. The South Americans said, look, this is only the first expansion phase. There are going to be others. So the next one, which is going to be in Russia at the next summit, the 16th BRICS summit, which will be in Kazan in Russia next year. That's very, very important. Officially confirmed by Vladimir Putin. And
so, like I said earlier, remember what the president of South Africa said. He said that it was going to be the first phase. Remember, so this is already dangerous to the West, right? This first, just BRICS by itself was already having the West going, what are they doing? What are they doing? And so now we just went from a 5-nation BRICS block to an 11-nation BRICS block. But that's just phase 1, baby. They're just getting started. So now they're expanding. And now phase 2, they're going to be like Africa. You know what I'm saying? They're looking at the pantry of the world. That's what they're going to be doing. So I'm going to bring up an African map just so that we can have a really good synopsis geologically as to what is going to be happening within these African nations. I'm trying to get the best. Maybe I can use that map. Let me see. Yeah, I think that'll work. Let me take that down. All right, so just to share with you guys that this point. So let me see here. All right, so let's go to 1239. Okay. All right, so let's see what he says.
So in the end, I say, okay, let's get a very strategic African nation that nobody's talking about, Ethiopia. perfect. It's close to West Asia. It's Northeast Africa. It's close to new member Egypt. It's part of a very strategic Horn of Africa situation that involves the Red Sea, not far from the Suez Canal, you name it, and very rich in minerals and metals. Not to mention unexplored oil and gas reserves, copper, gold, platinum, tantalum, you name it. Perfect, absolutely perfect. So in the end, they got to BRICS 11. So in terms of a master coup, I call it a master stroke for several reasons. But I think the most important reasons, and I would like to hear Michael about that, is the energy angle. Now they control at least 47, 48% global oil production. In the map.
Now, I'm going to share with you guys why is this so strategic? Because this is the important piece that a lot of people aren't thinking about. So now they just got in Ethiopia. And Ethiopia is a very strategic spot. So here's Ethiopia right here at the Horn of Africa. You have Eritrea, Djibouti, and Somalia. And then you have Kenya, Uganda, and Sudan. There's a lot of oil in this region. And so when you look at this area here, this is a great block because right now the United States is also putting sanctions on Somalia. They're trying to take over Somalia. And then also on top of that, you have right here, right above is actually the other more Muslim and Arab nations on the opposite side. Actually, let me go here. Let me see if I can get a different map that actually shows. Yeah. All right, I'll just use this one. Okay. Because I want everybody to see where everything is so that you get more of a good synopsis as to why this is so strategic. So here's the map. So Ethiopia right here. Okay. Eritrea is right here, right? If you guys can see my mouse, right? Somalia, Sudan. Here's the Red Sea, right? Here's Saudi Arabia, right near. Then you have Yemen, Oman, UAE is this little country right here, right? Right near Qatar. Then you have Iraq, Iran, Syria, Jordan, Turkey. So this is right in that neighborhood. And you don't think that these are also not going to join BRICS besides Iran, right? Iran, UAE have already are on, and Saudi Arabia are already on board, and they will start their BRICS membership this January. And where do we go to war in order to extract oil and resources? Well, look, we went to places like Iraq, right? And Iran. So now, guess what? These are very oil-rich nations. And so there is fear by the West for us to, there's fear by the West in order for them to be scared, is because they're going to lose a lot as far as the expansion of BRICS goes. Now, let's go back. And there's a little bit more that I want to get from Pepe Escobar. So 13, 14, 15, 50. Okay.
Stage, which is going to be next year, assuming they get, for instance, Algeria, Venezuela, and Kazakhstan. This is going to jump to what? Maybe 70% of global oil production.
Did you hear that? Yo! That is crazy. Crazy. Algeria, Venezuela, and Kazakhstan. We already know that Venezuela got a lot of oil. So in phase 2, if they're looking at Venezuela, Algeria, and Kazakhstan, that's going to be massive. 70% of the oil production being BRICS nations. The petrodollar is done. It's done. It is donezo. This, it is over. Let's continue.
Or maybe even 80%. So this is immense, because now, on top of all that, they control, and this is off the top of my head, maybe I'll be forgetting something, the Northern Sea route, the Arctic route, all the overland corridors of the Belt and Road Initiative, the New Silk Roads, the overland corridors that traverse from Xinjiang across the heartland all the way to West Asia, and then further on to Europe. The Maritime Silk Road, because now they are very, very important in the Arabian Sea, in the Gulf of Oman, in the Persian Gulf, in the Red Sea, and in the Suez Canal. So all that with one single stroke in the chessboard. So I see this as really a master stroke, And it's no wonder that nobody in the West, at least for the past 24 hours, have mentioned anything about how BRICS now is a major player in global energy markets, commodities markets for obvious reasons, Russia, Brazil, Argentina, etc., but also in the energy markets. And that was a result, I would say, the second stage of this approximation between Iran and Saudi Arabia, which started by the Russians here. First, they talked to the Iranians, then they talked to the Saudis. In the next stage, they put the Iranians and the Saudis on the same table, and then the ball went to the other side of the Chinese, and the Russians told the Chinese, "Okay, now it's goal time." And obviously, the Chinese did a messy, and they scored in Beijing. We had the agreement between Tehran and Riyadh of the rapprochement, having a diplomatic relationship.
In other words, checkmate. You guys remember the movie? You guys remember the movie Independence Day? This came out back in the 90s. Remember when Jeff Goldblum's character was talking to, I guess, his boss at the cable company, and he's like, and his boss is like, "Well, what's next?" And then, his character goes, "Checkmate." And then his boss goes, oh my God, David, I need to call my mother. I need to tell her to go to Atlanta. Like, it's funny. It's just hilarious, because that's basically what's going on. It's checkmate. Because they're basically saying, yo, you guys think that you guys got us by the throat on the world stage. Well, meanwhile, we got you by the balls. It's over. And this is why the United States, Italy, Germany, Japan, the UK, this is why they're shaking in their boots right now, because they really don't have a recourse. The only really recourse that they have is militarily and nuclear. That's basically it. They really do not have any other way to get out of this. And they can try to, get Africa to play ball with them. Like, for instance, France is trying to force Africa to continue to play ball. But what just happened over the last recent weeks in Gabon, Burkina Faso, Niger, Mali, right? What has happened? They kicked France out. They're like, no, get out of our country. We're sick and tired of you guys taking advantage of us and exploiting us. And it doesn't make it any easier. The fact that debts were forgiven. Yes, debts were forgiven. By who, you say? Let's take a look at that, because this also intensifies the influence of BRICS. So let's go for the first in the timeline, China. So let's take a look at this. This article says China forgives 23 loans for 17 African countries, expands a win-win trade in infrastructure projects. So China is already forgiving loans already. They already did. So it says the Chinese government has announced that it is forgiving 23 interest-free loans for 17 African countries, African nations, while pledging to deepen its collaboration with the continent. This is in addition to China's cancellation of more than $3.4 billion with a B in debt and restructuring around $15 billion of debt in Africa between 2000 and 2019. So, and look, the United States is like, oh my God, they have debt traps. Bullshit. Because it says the United States has turned Africa into a battleground in this new Cold War on China and Russia. And Washington has weaponized dubious claims of Chinese debt traps, right, to try to demonize Beijing for its substantial infrastructure projects on the continent. Basically, what the United States is saying, oh my God, they're basically, the United States is basically projecting. The West is projecting, saying, they're setting debt traps for you guys. Can you believe it? What about the IMF and the World Bank? Aren't those not debt traps? We just talked about it a little bit earlier. They're setting up debt traps where they can never repay it. Meanwhile, China's going, oh yeah, these debts that we have with you guys, number one, are interest-free. So if we give you guys $1 billion, you guys only have to give us $1 billion back, no interest. Oh, you know what? Let's also build up the infrastructure in that country. Oh, you guys are having a hard time paying us back. Okay, you know what? Forgive the debt. We don't need it back. What? Meanwhile, you have loan sharks, international loan sharks like the IMF and the World Bank that are saying, no, you guys are going to be on debt. You guys are going to be on the hook for this debt for the rest of you, till the end of time. China's like, you know what? No, we don't need it. We don't need it back. You're good. You're good. You're good. And we're building your infrastructure. You don't think that the African nations are going to forget that? The African nations are like Pepperidge Farm. They never forget. Pepperidge Farm remembers, baby. That's exactly what's going on with the African nations. But it wasn't just China. China wasn't the only one who did it. There was another BRICS nation that has also forgiven debt. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Let's get to it. Let me show you. I shared this article before, but let's see. Russia writes off $23 billion in debt for Africa. That's what Putin did. Oh, shit. Oh, snap. Vladimir Putin, Russian president, says that the Russian government has written off the $23 billion debt burden of African countries. Putin spoke at the plenary session of the ongoing second Russia-Africa summit in 2023, holding from July 27th to July 28th. He said Moscow will allocate an additional $90 million for these purposes. Putin said Russia was advocating expansion of representation in African countries in the UN Security Council and other UN nations. Quote, Russia and Africa strive to develop cooperation in all areas to strengthen honest, open, constructive partnership. Russia will also assist in opening new African embassies and consulates in Russia. He said sovereignty was not a one-time achieved state and must be continuously protected. So ultimately, Putin, of all people, is saying African nations need their own sovereignty and self-determination. You don't hear the United States saying that. You don't hear the United Kingdom or Canada or Italy or Germany or Japan saying that. They're not saying that. The IMF and the World Bank ain't saying that. China and Russia are saying that. And now people can go, well, this is just a ploy because they're just looking out for themselves. Of course they are. Of course. I was in a webinar with the Black is Back Coalition. Shout out to them. And they're also in association with the African People's Socialist Party. And you had people like Chairman Omali Yeshitela also speaking at that webinar. And one of the things that I asked them a question was that, is there a concern that China and Russia are really just doing this as an underhanded means to be more of a imperialist power within the continent of Africa? And in their opinion, they said no. Because here's the thing. The West, and particularly the US and the UK, see African nations as a store to be robbed, to be held up at gunpoint in order for them to steal the resources out of the stockroom and then demand them to go into the cash register and give them also the money. Give me the loot. Russia and China see the African nations as a storefront market that they come in and they go, how much for your lithium? How much for your gold? How much for your uranium? How much do we pay? Oh, do you guys got any rubber in stock? Okay, can we order some of that? So one side, the Western side, is treating it like a victim-perpetrator relationship or like a loan shark and victim relationship. Whereas you have countries like Russia and China going, it's like a customer, it's like a patron and merchant relationship. See? And then the United States will continuously demonize Russia and China and go, well, they're just doing it because they have their own interest. And of course they do. Just like you have your own interest of your household whenever you go to a grocery store to buy food. You're there for your own household's interests. It's the same thing. It's not any different. And what's so wrong with that, right? They need these resources for their countries, but they're not willing to exploit. They're willing to have an actual working relationship that is merchant and patron relationship with these African nations. That's the difference. They're willing to actually respect these nations rather than exploit them. And that's the point. It's fair. That's what it is. It's about fairness. That's what the BRICS blocksome nations are about. Fairness. And so, because they're doing this, the United States and the West are going, no, this is not fair. But it's like one of my favorite quotes. To the privileged, equality feels like oppression. So the West feels like they're being oppressed because now a boundary is being set. When you're being abused and you start to set a boundary, the abuser feels threatened. The abuser feels like, what are you doing? And the abused person, the victim, is going, yeah, I'm setting the terms now. You will no longer be able to do what you were doing to me before. And so now the abuser is going, oh my God, you can't do this. And the victim is going, I just did. That's what's going on. And so this is why I want to talk about this subject. So that, because the thing is that people like myself I was somebody who didn't really know what was going on. And it is important to realize this, because now you'll know how and why the United States starts to maneuver in the way it does, especially with those of us here at home. Because as the United States moves and what it does on the world stage, it does in a microcosm within its own borders. And so now that the world is basically saying, nope, you can't do this. Now the United States is, guess what they're going to do? They're going to take it out. They might start taking it out on us. But this is why it's important for us to try to change the system from the inside. You see, now you have the attacks against the empire from the outside. Now we're on the inside, and now we also have to start a death by 1,000 cuts, right? On the inside. Remember The Incredibles? Where at the end of the movie, Bob figures out that the only thing that can damage it is itself. From the inside. Right? You see, in a sense, there's allies on the outside. But who's in the underbelly? You and me. This is why if they are building dual power outside of the United States in order to inflict a blow to the Western hegemony, we have to inflict a blow from the inside to stop the Western hegemony so that we can actually have a better system for the workers and the poor within the imperial core. So it's a two-pronged thing. They gave us the signal. The bat signal's in the air, baby. That's what's going on. Are we going to heed it and go, all right, let's start getting on the ground. And even if it's in mutual aid within small little tight-knit communities. Like, for instance, I have the Orlando Mutual Aid chapter here in Orlando for a Revolutionary Blackout Network. That's what I have. What are you guys doing on the ground for your neighbors? Right? It starts very, very small. But you guys can also be a part of it. And the thing is, it's not necessarily destroying America. It's saving America from the corporate dictators that are running our country into the ground. Mutual aid is self-defense against the imperialist powers. That's the point that we need to bring home. Listen to what they're doing. Watch what they're doing outside of the United States and conduct yourselves accordingly. So, did you like the stream? Go ahead and give me a like. I'm going to go to the chat really quick because I talk a lot. But this was something that I was like, yo, we got to talk about this. And the thing is that I'm not as educated on foreign policy as I would like to be. And so diving into this was great for me. And so I know that if I learn from this, then I can also use my way of explaining things to teach people, especially a lot of you that are in disenfranchised communities, to pay attention to what foreign policy. Because domestic policy matters, but foreign policy matters just as much. So let me take a look on the rock, see if there's any type of comments on the rock. Oh, yep. Let's go to the rock. The rock to the fin, to the rock to the fin, to the rock to the fin, to the rock to the fin. Hit me one more time. All right. Okay, so thanks for the tip on Rockin' Roger. He says, I swear if New York State was a CBI amendment state and the only thing I would be talking to politicians for is when are you going to put a stop sign or traffic light at that corner or how come I'm having such a problem with this government agency? Hey, come over here and fix this goddamn pothole. Constituent services, the last thing I'd be going to them for is please pass the law. Roger continues, says, how many times am I going to have to say to people who vote for, how many times am I going to have to say who people vote for does not necessarily reflect the policies they would like to see done? That's a very good point. It says the only way to truly see how people feel about the policies is to get them to vote on policy itself. Don't tell me West Virginians don't want single payer health care because they voted Manchin and more. Give West Virginia the Citizen Ballot Initiative for amendments. Only New York City instead of New York State ended qualified immunity. He continues, says, BRICS member nations have seen the people of America being unable to stop the imperialist U.S. government from doing to them what they do to themselves as well. So this is actually going to help Americans who are at the bottom. Great point, Roger. He continues, says, $1 US equaling $1 here. Wow, this means three things. One, corporations will be forced to manufacture here and deal with their workers. Thank you for that. Two, workers will have so much leverage, will be able to rip ownership away from them and cooperatize the enterprise. By the way, make that a slogan. Cooperatize the enterprise. I like that. Cooperatize the enterprise. Three, it is both good and bad. The good is we're going to get reparations, and the bad, well, the dollar ain't worth shit anymore now. Might as well. This was a joke. This was a joke I'd make when I was younger, which was the same joke I'd make about if we had a black president and he'd have to be a sellout. Thanks for that, Roger. Roger's the gift that keeps on giving. He continues, says, at this point, we should just rename this two countries previously invaded and coup by the U.S. With all these countries being added, we can no longer make a cool sounding acronym. It's just getting out of hand. The moment that you come up with a cool sounding acronym, someone says, hey, I want to be part of that club too. That's true. Because BRICS sounds really base. It really sounds really cool, but now you have to have all these countries. So now it's really not an acronym anymore. It says, God damn, now we have got to start over. I invited you to the party. Now you bring all these older people. Even though they're both siblings with each other representing horizontalism, I'd argue that this is more of a global intergovernmental cooperative than a mutual aid because of the one word that separates mutual aid from cooperatives: commerce. That's also a really good point, Roger. That's a good one. A global intergovernmental cooperative. Ooh, I may have to correct myself on that one. He says, also, speaking of co-ops, we do have a resource that we can invest and cultivate. We can be unique in hemp, which can be used for supercapacitors and battery. Really? Hemp? Hemp, you say? I saw that hemp can also be used as bricks for housing. It's also fire retardant, meaning that it can't really burn. So even if you had a fire, then it won't burn down the house, which is a beautiful thing. So this is interesting. Roger ends with, and he says, and quite possibly for electronic components, the graphene that is naturally comes from it makes it more powerful and long-lasting than batteries made from lithium, cobalt, and other metals. It also means that by harvesting and cultivating, you are giving back to the earth rather than taking from it with excavating those metals, minerals, and other resources. We can work with tribal nations who perfected hemp. Tribal nations like the indigenous here in the United States of America. Oh boy, Roger, you just be full of good ideas. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. All right, so let's go to the chat. All right. Dwayne says the Europeans view Africa as subhuman. They are Nazis. Damn. It took Russia to treat Africa fairly. Damn. Yeah. Ooh. Yeah. Yeah. Dwayne says, tell me again, white supremacy doesn't matter. Zombie in the air says, neocolonialism, you don't occupy, you just take the resources. That is true. DC says, Lebanon is considered to be part of Asia, the westernmost part geographically. Thank you very much. Let me see. Reality Revolution said they put Saudis on the Human Rights Council. I also know. Yeah, that's the only thing that makes me pause is that Saudi Arabia being part of it as well. But it also would damage the West, Saudi Arabia being part of the BRICS bloc. So it's just maybe some of these other countries can have more of a greater influence, a more humanist influence on Saudi Arabia. I'm hoping, but I'm not holding my breath, just letting you know. Let me see. All right. I'm trying to make sure I spread this out. Kill Your Grigor says, wait, what the F? My hemp burns? Burn in a bowl right now. Take a puff from me, will you, Kill Your Grigors? Oh my goodness. Thank you for the super chat, Roger. Roger says, I killed Lumumba for seeking Soviet alliance. Yeah, it's wild, man. You know, whenever you try to go along with some of these countries that the U.S. and the West really try to demonize, really as for the Cold War tactics that they do. You know, the country, of the United States really just does not want people to know that workers should have the power within, their own nations. They should have their own self-determination. We don't have self-determination in the United States. I think that should be made abundantly clear. You and I, as citizens, as voters, we don't have self-determination, because if we did, then a lot of the things that are popular, especially in the polls, like, for instance, single-payer healthcare, would have been law a long time ago. But we don't have it, which means that we really don't have self-determination. Who determines our nation is the corporations and the ultra-rich. They're the ones that determine the will of the nation. We don't have self-determination. So, of course, because the United States is being ran by totalitarian dictators, of course they don't want other nations to have self-determination either, because they are totalitarian dictators. A dictator is going to dictate, right? So that's why we have to take it over as workers, as poor people, run this nation. Because when we actually start to run this nation, truly run this nation, and get it out of the hands of the corporate dictators, then how are we going to look at other countries around the globe? We're going to see them. We're going to see ourselves in them. We're going to see countries like the DRC. We're going to see countries like Zimbabwe. We're going to see these countries and go, oh, well, the workers just want to run their country how they want it. Okay, we're not going to interfere. Or we'll see countries that are going through something like Sri Lanka, or countries like Bangladesh or Venezuela. We're going to go, oh, you guys are having some issues? Okay, we'll send some doctors your way. We'll send some engineers your way. Oh, you guys need help with infrastructure? All right, we got you. We don't want the workers to suffer in these countries. So that's what we're going to do. Because we see ourselves in them. Who the country is dominated by, how they will treat other nations. Look at Cuba. Cuba has an immense amount of doctors per capita. The country is ran by workers. And they have wonderful healthcare. They have magnificent healthcare. And when they saw Italy going through what they went through during the pandemic, what did Cuba do? They sent their doctors to Italy to help them through the pandemic. That's because Cuba sees the workers in Italy, because Cuba is ran by workers. They're going to benefit from the poorest people to everybody else above. So that's why they did it. The United States could be the same. We could be a greater Cuba. But it all depends on the workers rising up, building up dual power, and implementing mutual aid. Some of these things, these apparatus can be put in place by, like what Roger Meadows said, Citizen Ballot Initiatives that make it illegal for private equity to own things like hospitals, homes, utilities, things like that. And then as we build, for instance, CBIs to get rid of qualified immunity, do all these different things to circumvent the politicians, so then we can actually take more control, or at least cushion us when we actually do rise up, so that we may not get damaged, or even if we do get damaged, it's not as hard of a fall. So you know what I mean? So that's why doing things on a local level, especially going around the politicians, is important. Right? Yes, Miguel. Medical doctors is Cuba's biggest export. Thank you so very much. Also, a huge shout out and thank you to Dwayne for becoming a member. Clap it up for Dwayne. Thank you so very much. Yes, we have memberships here. So thank you so very much for becoming a member. All right. Yes, Dwayne. Also, Kwame Ture and Walter Rodney are a must reading. Kwame Ture is my birthday twin, by the way. Just letting you know. I'm quite proud of it. All right, so I'm going to check to make sure that I don't miss anything. Let me see. Just making sure. Okay. Just making sure that I got all of the super chats as well as the tips on Rockfin. Let me check. Let's check on the Rumble side. Rumble side, how you doing out there? Let me see. Hey girl, how you doing? You are the one that I'm really pursuing. Let me see. All right. So, all right. Got a couple people watching on the Rumble side. Good to see you. Okay. All right. Checking. Make sure to give me a like on the Rumble side too. All right. Holla at your boy. Okay. So now, did you like the stream? Please make sure to give me a like if you haven't already. And if you have not subscribed, go ahead and hit that little red box there. All right. And turn that box from red to gray, baby. All right. So just letting you guys know, thank you so very much for joining this stream. Just to let you guys know, if you guys would like to, you guys can go to my Substack. You guys can go to jaybefaunt.substack.com to get notifications, as well as the articles that I will be writing in the future for Substack. So you guys can get email notifications whenever I do go live or upload clips. So you guys also have that as well. Just let you guys know again, I also have a merch store. You guys can go to Bonfire and I have a merch store there as well. Also, just to let you guys know as well, please make sure to go to oceqi.org to end qualified immunity, to help Ohioans to end qualified immunity and to learn how we can do it ourselves also in your own states. So we can do ending qualified immunity via ballot initiative to constitutional amendments, which makes it extremely hard for them to overturn. All right. Like, share, and subscribe for more Jaybefaunt deliciousness. I am delicious, honey. All right. So, and thank you so very much to all the patrons on Patreon and Coffee. So if you guys would like to, you guys can become patrons on there as well. Link in the description below. All right. So I think I'm going to end the stream with the song that I started the BRICS one with. That was funny, right? I think that was hilarious. We like to have fun here on the channel. And it's the Tom Joyner Morning Show. If you guys would like to, towards the end of this month, we're going to be doing the action on the ground for the chapter for RB Revolutionary Blackout Network's mutual aid chapter. We're going to be on the ground giving out care packages. So let me know. You guys can go to my channel, go into the community section, the about section. You guys can see my email. You guys can send me an email if you guys would like to be informed when we do that action. We're going to be giving out these care packages to the homeless people in Orlando. If you are in Orlando, please, let me know so that we can actually do that. I will also be letting you guys know also while in stream and also in the community section. I'll be letting you guys know of that as well. So keep your ears out, and it will be on September 23rd. But I'm just letting you guys know now, so some of you guys can plan. If some of you guys are from out of town here in Florida, you guys can, converge, and you guys can do that as well. So thank you so very much for that. Now, like I always say, water your plants, water yourselves, leave the world better than you found it. All right. Make sure to smoke them if you got them, and drink them if you got them. If you ain't got them, then watch something funny, because joy is revolutionary. And forehead kisses to every single one of you. Thank you so very much. Also, keep in mind, let people know about what's happening with BRICS and quell their concerns. Let them know that this is actually going to be beneficial for us as workers within the nation, especially within the Imperial Core, because guess what? We need all the help that we can get. So, all right, let's go back to the song, and I will see y'all in the next one. Bye-bye.
Brazil BRICS, Russian BRICS, the Indian BRICS, Chinese BRICS, South Africa BRICS. They ain't talking Gucci man, but they've been talking BRICS. So these 5 countries came together with the intent to make America's dollar equivalent to 0 cent. If that happened, even wealthy people won't even be rich, because everything we've ever known quadruples in the expense. Picture this: for 1 BRICS dollar, America needs 55, which means they gonna overcharge for all of their supplies. The Jordans made in China, price range by different size. You will have to multiply that price range by 55. Do the math. 300 times 55 equals more people struggling to survive. Equals more robberies, crime super high. Equals more people in danger, more people die. The power of the American dollar is at stake, because they want to dethrone our dollar till it deflates, which means everything you buy or own will inflate. So the lifestyles we've grown to know will erase. Baby, educate yourself, come up with a plan. Find a couple friends and all of y'all pitching for some land. Learn to plant, learn to be a natural human once again. because wherever BRICS begin, America wealth could end.
Okay, Roger. Last thing. Oh, jeez. All right. Thank you so much for the tip on Rockin' Roger. He shared this link. It says, hemp for victory. Researchers make better, cheaper batteries from plant waste. It says, ever since the movie Reefer Madness was released in 1936, Americans have had a pathological fear of hemp. Because of it, the lowly hemp plant, which may have more uses than any other crop, has been treated with scorn. And yet, it could be the key component for future batteries, making them more energy dense and lowering their costs significantly. One of the first researchers to delve into the benefits of hemp was Dr. David Milton of Clarkson University in New York, who led a team that cooked hemp bark and turned it into artificial graphene. His work was published in the Journal of American Chemical Society in 2014. Milton told the BBC, "People ask me, why hemp? I say, why not? We're making graphene-like materials for 1,000th of the price, and we're doing it with waste." So, yes, thank you so very much for that, Roger. And yeah. Okay, bye.
BRICS, Brazil BRICS, Russian BRICS, the Indian BRICS, Chinese BRICS, South Africa BRICS. They ain't talking Gucci man, but they've been talking BRICS. So these 5 countries came together with the intent